All right, let's hear from you now about the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act, a measure that some are using successfully in the courts to challenge vaccine mandates when it comes to COVID-19 and other COVID-19 mandates being imposed not just by the governor, but by employers. It is the WMAY morning news feed. I'm Greg Bishop. Give us a call at 217-629-7970. We anticipated this was going to happen weeks ago, hearing conversations from people on record, off record, on background, and even on these airwaves, that there could be a move to change the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act, a measure that's been on the books for decades, that essentially says that you cannot discriminate against somebody in their job, public or private, for not complying with a medical procedure that they have a conscientious objection to. We've heard from the Illinois Fraternal Order of Police, which have said that they will oppose any change to the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act. We've seen the Illinois Conference of Catholic Bishops put out a note to the governor and to the legislative leaders, ultimately saying that they do not support changing the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act, though they seem to be okay with mandating testing. But when it comes to the COVID-19 vaccine, they also say they feel that it's important that the vaccine is administered as a sign of love for the community. But they also don't think that it's smart or prudent to take away someone's ability to exercise their conscientious objection to medical procedures. And I do want to read to you one line here that the Catholic Conference of Bishops wrote that I double underlined. It said the purpose of the HCRCA is not to protect only the conscientious objections of those who share the majority's belief. To the contrary, it's specifically intended to protect those whose consciences demand that they abstain from a medicine or practice favored by the majority. All right, so I want to hear from you, 217-629-7970. That's the phone number here on the WMAY morning news feed. Again, 217-629-7970. Give us a call because they're looking to change the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act. The measure has been on the books for decades. It was amended back in the 90s. But there's another amendment that could be surfacing, and a hearing is scheduled for this afternoon at the State House in the House Executive Committee. What exactly is this particular amendment going to do? Well, it looks to change the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act to ultimately say that somebody could be fired for not following COVID-19 mitigation. It doesn't specifically spell out vaccines, but it says that any measures to prevent the transmission of COVID-19 or any pathogens that result in COVID-19. Quote from the proposed amendment to Senate Bill 1169, it's not a violation of the act to enforce such measures or requirements, including by terminating employment or excluding individuals from school, a place of employment, a public or private premises, or all in response to noncompliance. So a hearing originally was this is kind of bizarre, and I've tried to get some indication of what happened here, but I have yet to hear back from the Speaker's office. When this surfaced yesterday, the amendment to Senate Bill 1169, they put it into a committee. And the committee had a hearing date set. And that hearing date was set for Thursday morning at 8:30. So I put my story together. I had response from the Illinois Fraternal Order of Police opposing any changes and the text of the amendment and so on. I published a story, and then I got on the treadmill. And afterwards, I was like, I'm kind of interested to see how many witness slips have filed in opposition to the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act changes. And by the time I got off the treadmill, I went to the Thursday morning hearing date, and I couldn't find the bill. It wasn't there anymore. All of a sudden, it was moved to a Tuesday afternoon executive hearing in the House. So I don't know, it's not like they announced that or send out emails saying, hey, the hearing's been moved. But that is the case. It was on Thursday, but now it's on Tuesday this afternoon. Changes to the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act are going to be heard in a House amendment to a Senate bill, which means they can move it out of committee, get it onto the floor vote for it, and then send it over to the Senate for concurrence. And they could do all of that before the end of the week this week. What do you think? 217-629-7970 is the phone number. Should the State House change the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act to allow for people to be terminated from their jobs for not complying with COVID-19 vaccine mandates and testing requirements and other measures, quote unquote? Or should the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act be kept in place? Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Well, good morning, Greg. I've been hearing that there's some type of issue with religious beliefs in using this vaccine because it was made from, I guess, supposedly human material or DNA or something from aborted fetuses.
That is an objection that some have, but initially Pfizer and Moderna with the mRNA vaccine said that there were not aborted fetal tissues used in this, but then you had organizations like Project Veritas that did some muckraking journalism and got somebody to leak emails showing that they did use stem cells in the initial phases of manufacturing this. So that's, of course, reporting from Project Veritas. I've not independently confirmed that, but that could throw a fork into this. But religious organizations like the Catholic Church have said that the mRNA vaccine is fine. But the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, I think, does have some stem cell use in their production, I think. Don't quote me on that, but but that aside, there's still other issues that people have when it comes to their conscientious objection. Do you think they should change it? 217-629-7970. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Our justice system and legislatures have failed us this entire time. They've slow played these cases through the courts, and they're finally starting to move. And now now the legislatures who didn't want to expend political capital and put an X on their back, a target on their back, are now going to have to get on board and try to change these laws because they know that these cases are about ready to win in court. And no, they shouldn't change the law. It's discrimination, point blank. And if they're going to change this law for this case, then what are they going to change next? It's time to get on the phone and call your legislatures and demand it's time for all this nonsense and blow them up and keep calling and keep writing until finally they start to listen. Tacit consent is consent, people. You need to get on the phone and start calling your legislature.
And I looked at some of the witness slips that were filed in opposition yesterday afternoon when I finally found the hearing dates and the correct dates and saw the witness slips. It was like 175 opposed. This morning when I woke up, 22,000 opposed.
Yeah.
This morning, just moments ago, I checked. It's approaching 27,000 opposed. I imagine just within the hour, it's probably going to get to 30,000 people filing witness slips in opposition to changing the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act, while there's not even 400 that support it, changing the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act. In the years I've followed the State House and looked at controversial legislation, I can't recall when there's been tens of thousands. There's been thousands of people file in opposition to things, but I can't recall when there's been tens of thousands of opposition slips filed against a proposed piece of legislation.
Our representatives take silence as consent far too often. And just because people have the vaccine, I have the vaccine, but I thoroughly oppose the mandate of the vaccine. It should be somebody's choice. And if we don't stand up for our rights right now and remind them, then what rights are you going to lose in the future? Ask yourself that question. Get on the phone and call your legislature.
Appreciate the call. Hearing from you at 217-629-7970 live here on the WMAY Morning News feed. Should we keep the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act intact, or should we change it to allow for somebody to be terminated and discriminated against in their job for not complying with COVID-19 vaccine mandates or any other measures to slow the spread of COVID-19? Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, we need to go. We need to keep it. I mean, I agree with the caller before last. Every verbatim. I agree with the sentiment. It's what are they going to change next? And I mean, everybody needs to stand up. You know, I'll tell you what. Everybody used to go to work over it. I guarantee you, we won't be without work for a week because they won't be able to deal with it.
Appreciate the call. And you're seeing people across the country doing just that. They're walking out. Firefighters are leaving their departments because of the mandates in some places. Police. You look at what's going on in Chicago, for instance, and you've got potentially thousands of Chicago police officers that are going to be leaving the job, possibly recruited to places like Florida or Indiana or Alaska, and states that don't have vaccine mandates. But here in the state of Illinois, we have the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act, which is an act that was passed decades ago. It's been amended once, maybe twice, and ultimately says it is discrimination if you prohibit somebody from being able to work because of their conscientious objection to a health procedure. And people grabbed that and they interpreted that as I have a conscientious objection to the COVID-19 vaccine, and you can't discriminate against me. We've seen this law now used multiple times in courts across the state to block employers from firing people, like at hospitals, for instance. So, that here we are 20 months into the pandemic, and this is the issue. This is the issue that lawmakers are considering coming back and dealing with while they've been hands off most of the pandemic when it comes to the governor's COVID-19 mitigation policies. Good morning. You're on WMAY. Should we keep the HCRCA intact or should we change it?
We should keep it intact because that's the job of government. The government is supposed to be there to protect our rights of life, liberty, and happiness. And they've got to prove that there's even a pandemic to begin with, because if you look at the numbers, there is no emergency. So
we were told back in March of 2020 that we were shutting down the economy to keep the hospitals open. And they canceled elective procedures to keep the hospitals open. And the fear the fear that spread across kept a lot of people from getting checked out for a variety of things.
Because people don't look into what's going on. They sit there and listen to they've put government in place of their own common sense. Well, and if you can't figure anything out on your own, research on your own, you have no business even voting.
Well, that's one man's opinion. We'll hear more. 217-629-7970 is the phone number. But to the point of, we were told 2 weeks to slow the spread, to keep the hospitals open. But now we're looking at firing hundreds of hospital workers because they won't take a COVID-19 vaccine, even though they may have had COVID-19. And that's something else that's not really worked into the equation here is, what about natural immunity? 217-629-7970. Good morning. Should we change the RCA, or should we keep it as is?
I really think we should just keep it as is. And it was like you were just saying, Greg, all the nurses went from heroes to zeros overnight. And, I just don't understand how the government basically, J.B. Pritzker can, basically claim that all these healthcare workers are the heroes of the community and everything like that, and then all of a sudden, you're not getting a shot. Okay, bye. We're just going to dump you on the street. And just like you said with the police officers in Chicago, that's a third of them. A third of Chicago's police force will basically be gone. And if you do that to the healthcare workers, like you said, they're going to Chicago, they're going to Miami, to Missouri, to Indiana. They're going to go somewhere else, and that's a lot of jobs that Illinois will be giving up, and a lot of tax dollars that Illinois is just going to not have. So have a good day, Greg.
It's pretty incredible. I appreciate that, and something that I think you're going to hear a lot more about throughout the day. We'll take one more call here, a few more calls before the break. Woefully late for it, but I want to fit all the calls in because it's an important issue. Good morning. What are your thoughts? Should we keep the HCRCA intact or change it? Good morning.
We should keep the HRAC intact. It was our intention of founding fathers were to protect the minorities, which is why they didn't create our country as a democracy. They created us as a republic. And a lot of people look back to other types of discrimination, but all you have to do is think about the majority gets all upset, and we end up taking and impounding people from Japan. We don't allow the Chinese to vote. We didn't abolish slavery because the minority kept saying, oh, no, we need to keep this. We need to start really protecting the minorities, for crying out loud. This is ridiculous.
And that's a view that the Catholic Conference of Bishops actually said. And I'll read that that part of this letter again because I think it's something worth hearing. And it was something also that Daniel Sir from the Liberty Justice Center seemed to indicate as well. The purpose of the HCRCA is not to protect only the conscientious objection of those who share the majority's belief. To the contrary, it's specifically intended to protect those whose conscientious objections demand that they abstain from a medicine or practice favored by the majority. So it is about protecting the minority opinion. And that's what free speech is about as well. Free speech rights aren't about making sure that, the most popular opinion is the one that's heard. No, free speech rights are about ensuring that unpopular opinions get heard. Because as we've seen in society, it's pretty easy to shape and manipulate public opinion. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Yeah, you pretty much hit the nail on the head when you said it about, 2 minutes ago. We're 20 months into a pandemic. That just makes no feasible sense. You can't go 20 months into a pandemic without mountains of dead bodies. I mean, I know you're not a huge football fan, Bishop, but next time, like say on Sunday, turn on an NFL game and watch all these people sitting in the stand shoulder to shoulder.
No masks.
And now we're going into week 7. Where are all the dead bodies from actually people watching football games live and in person?
Well, and the hospitals are open. There's capacity at the hospitals, but apparently we're still in an emergency level where the legislature is not really doing much to check the governor's powers, except for this one issue, the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act, which has been used successfully in the courts to keep people from being forced to inject something into their body. Got to take a break. Appreciate everybody calling in. It is the WMAY morning.